Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, and colleagues, good afternoon. My name is Umil, and I am from Bank Negara, Malaysia. It is an honor to welcome you to the Eminent Persons Dialogue. Before we commence the session, I would like to briefly go over a few housekeeping matters. Restroom is located outside this hall to the left. Should you need assistance at any point, please reach out to our team members with turquoise lanyards, who will be delighted to assist you. Kindly be informed that official photography will take place throughout the session. Thank you for your attention. We anticipate a fruitful and engaging session today. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to invite the Governor of Bank Negara Malaysia, Yang Berbahagia Datuk Sri Abdul Rashid Ghaffur, to deliver the welcoming speech.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to the Eminent Persons Dialogue 2025. It is a privilege to host you here in KL, alongside the 12th ASEAN Finance Ministers and Central Bank Governors meeting. This dialogue holds particular resonance as it is convened under the theme Inclusivity and Sustainability, reflecting Malaysia's ASEAN chairmanship aspiration for a more cohesive and prosperous region. As we approach the conclusion of the ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint 2025, it is timely to reflect on the progress ASEAN has made in strengthening financial integration and cooperation. ASEAN today stands as the fifth largest economy in the world, growing at an average rate of 4.8% from 2022 to 2023, outpacing the global average of 3.45%. This growth underscores ASEAN's vital contribution to the global economic stability. Yet, we now face an increasingly complex and uncertain global landscape. The world is becoming more multipolar, with intensifying geopolitical tensions, national protectionism, and geo-economic fragmentation. Just days ago, the US administration announced sweeping tariffs that will directly affect all ASEAN countries. This, without a doubt, will test our ASEAN way. The principle of neutrality, goodwill, and cooperation, which form the foundation of our regional integration. The key question before us is, can ASEAN continue to uphold neutrality and inclusivity in an increasingly polarized world? Or will the region need a more strategic approach to secure long-term economic resilience and prosperity? The theme of today's dialogue is therefore very timely and fitting. We are honored to be joined by some of the region's most respected thought leaders. Our keynote speaker, Tan Sri Dr. Zati Akhtar Aziz, has long been a strong guiding voice on regional and global financial issues and an architect of ASEAN financial integration. She will be followed by a panel of accomplished regional leaders, Dr. Muhammad Chatib Basri, Dr. Viratai Santiprabop, and Tan Sri Nazir Razak, bringing deep experience from the realms of policy making, financial markets, and regional development. And moderating today's dialogue is Ms. Wong Shao Ning. As intra-ASEAN trade and investment remain modest at approximately 20% and 10% respectively, there is clearly much work to be done. Strengthening financial connectivity, improving policy coordination, and deepening integration are key for ASEAN to remain agile and competitive in a multipolar world. This dialogue provides an opportunity to reflect on our progress, confront our shared challenges, and explore how, moving forward, ASEAN can navigate multipolarity and capital flow volatility, harness digital innovation for inclusion, and meet the urgent calls for sustainable and climate-resilient growth. Malaysia's chairmanship priorities this year are focused on enhancing regional payment connectivity, bolstering ASEAN's response to climate challenges, and reinforcing regional resilience through the Chiang Mai Initiative multilateralization. Ladies and gentlemen, as we stand at this dangerous cliff of change, let us reaffirm ASEAN's enduring values while adapting with courage and clarity. The conversations we have today will be critical in charting that course and support of the ASEAN Community Vision 2045. I thank our keynote speaker, our distinguished panel, our moderator, and all of you for your presence and participation. Terima kasih, and I look forward to an insightful and constructive dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Governor, for the inspiring words, which really sets the tone for today's session. It is now my privilege to invite Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri Dr. Zati Akhtar Aziz, former Governor of Bank Negara Malaysia, to the stage to deliver her keynote address. Tan Sri Dr. Zati, renowned for her profound expertise and leadership in the financial industry, will be sharing her perspective on today's theme, ASEAN Financial Integration in a Multipolar World. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Tan Sri Dr. Zati Akhtar Aziz.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it was exactly 2 decades ago when the pivotal decision was made for the ASEAN economies to come together and pursue regional financial integration. An extensive study on the currency arrangement for ASEAN, conducted in 2004, had reached a definitive conclusion that ASEAN economies should not adopt a monetary union and a single currency. Instead, that ASEAN should pursue regional financial integration. It is my very great honor to be invited today to speak this afternoon on ASEAN regional financial integration in a world that is becoming increasingly multipolar. Our early history shows that regional economic integration in the form of intra-regional trade had already taken place since our ancient times, and that this trend has continued over the ages as our region became an important part of the globalization process in the world economy. The globalization of finance, however, is a more recent 20th century phenomenon. With it came new formidable challenges. It was the very insights gained from witnessing the financial turmoil in Europe in the early 1990s, which culminated in their decision for a monetary union in 1999, and also from the lessons that we learned from our experience during the Asian financial crises in 97, 98, that prompted our search for a monetary and financial arrangement for ASEAN. The ASEAN strategy for financial integration, defined by a common shared vision, steadfast conviction, and collaborative solidarity, is distinctive and unique. It is based on a model that values flexibility, respects national differences, and that prioritizes cooperation and collaboration without rigid institutionalization. It thus places emphasis on connectivity and collaboration while accommodating the diversity of member states and respecting the monetary sovereignty of respective economies. It has been my privilege to be part of this journey for ASEAN regional financial integration. From the very beginning, the motivation for pursuing greater regional financial integration was to facilitate the effective intermediation of funds from the region to be reinvested in the region. It was envisaged that this would contribute towards more stable financial flows, thereby offsetting destabilizing financial flows. And being high savings economies, it would also facilitate for some part of our domestic savings to be reinvested in the region. Additionally, it would also support the development of domestic financial markets, enhance the overall resilience of the regional financial systems, and contribute towards the financing of growth and development in the region. 2 decades following this decisive decision to pursue regional financial integration, not only has remarkable progress been achieved, but it has also realized the consequential results that were being envisioned. In essence, it has facilitated increased economic activity, improved access to markets, and reduced transaction costs, and has thus better served the people and businesses in the region. Most of all, it has also better prepared our economies to respond to the recent external shocks that has confronted the world economy. The most meaningful achievements can be seen in 5 major areas. The first involves the gradual regional liberalization in the financial services sector, such as in the banking and insurance. Given our diverse stages of development, this liberalization is based on the state of readiness, so as to avoid any disruptive and destabilizing consequences, thereby allowing for its benefits to be realized. These incremental financial liberalization efforts have enhanced efficiency, provided greater support for cross-border economic activity, and facilitated businesses to expand beyond their domestic markets. Following the Asian financial crisis, initiatives were also intensified to develop the domestic bond markets under the Asian Bond Fund Initiative, ABMI, including Korea, Hong Kong, and China. This market has grown by more than 20 times in the 20 years to 26 trillion US dollars. This development has enabled businesses to tap on a more stable domestic source of funding, avoid the over-concentration of funding from the banking sector, and reduce the reliance of funding in foreign currencies. Thirdly, the payments and settlements, once fragmented across multiple jurisdictions, have now become more seamless. Local currency settlement frameworks have made it easier and more cost-effective for businesses across the region to trade and invest in their respective local currencies. Meanwhile, regional payment linkages, including fast payment systems and interoperable QR payments, are projected to reach approximately 1.2 trillion US dollars by the end of this year. Having such a cross-border payment system in place has facilitated transactions across ASEAN to be more efficient, thus benefiting both consumers and businesses. Throughout this journey, efforts have also been directed at ensuring that financial integration does not come at the expense of financial inclusion. ASEAN digital financial ecosystem is evolving rapidly with digital banks and fintech innovations helping to bridge the gap for the unbanked and underbanked. The expansion of digital payments, while mobile banking and alternative financing platforms have now made financial services more accessible, ensuring that the financial integration process benefits the wider population. ASEAN has also embarked on strengthening the Chiang Mai Initiative multilateralism, which has been fortified further the region's financial safety net to provide crucial liquidity support in turbulent times and security during tranquil periods. This mechanism reinforces our collective ability to respond swiftly to external shocks and to safeguard our macroeconomic and financial stability. More than just a facility, it is a hallmark of the region's cooperation, an assertion of regional solidarity and greater regional self-reliance, signaling that the region has the capacity and the political will to stand together in times of stress. Finally, and equally important, is the ongoing commitment and progress achieved in sustainable finance, which sets the stage for the harmonization of taxonomies to align ASEAN's financial markets with the global sustainability goals. These achievements in regional financial integration and cooperation exemplify ASEAN's steadfast commitment to cultivating a robust, inclusive, and resilient financial ecosystem that provides us with a foundation for economic growth. But more importantly, it paves the way for us to adeptly navigate the current complexity of the global challenges and uncertainties that continue to confront the international financial system and the global economy. As we gather to reflect our past and on the potential course for the future, we need to recognize not only the strides that have been achieved, but also the recent prevailing major challenges that now needs to be overcome, while noting that the consensus-driven essence of ASEAN agreements aim at fostering widespread participation and the ownership of the regional initiatives. It has, however, generally resulted in a more deliberate pace of decision-making. The speed at which the global economic and financial landscape is now rapidly evolving has now heightened the need for priority to be accorded to not only the regional financial integration agenda, but to the coordinated management of the recent economic disruptions arising from the global trade shock that has erupted. This will be a test for ASEAN to rise to the challenge. Even prior to the recent external shock, the complexity of the current global environment was already being shaped by escalating geopolitical tensions and geoeconomic fragmentation. The shift to a multipolar order, while bringing the potential for greater stability, could undermine the current rules-based international system that has underpinned global prosperity. In this context, while ASEAN has always remained neutral, impartial, and steadfast to the principles that has governed us thus far, with emphasis on cooperation over confrontation, openness over insularity, and resilience over dependency. Our neutrality is not about detachment. It is about strategic autonomy. It is about being able to engage all parties constructively while remaining grounded in our own interests and values. ASEAN must therefore shape and not just adapt to the evolving global financial architecture and environment. The world today is characterized by multiple centers of economic influence, and ASEAN must navigate this shifting landscape with confidence and agility to adjust. While recognizing the realities, the region should actively shape the international financial and trade norms to ensure ASEAN's perspective and priorities are reflected in the global decision-making. At the same time, ASEAN is coming from a position of strength. Our internal resilience derived from our economic flexibility to adjust, our more diversified economic structure, and our reformed, restructured, and now more developed financial systems. Nevertheless, a more cohesive and coordinated approach to the challenges confronting the region's needs to be developed. It also needs to be reinforced by fortifying further ASEAN's financial safety net, the further potential for macroeconomic policy coordination, and improved institutional preparedness for the emerging shocks, which was cumulatively built on trust, driven by innovation, and anchored in a shared resilience. This brings me to what I believe must be our vision for ASEAN economic and financial integration beyond 2025, that is going to be in a dramatically different global landscape. The response by ASEAN in this new shifting terrain will require reinvention and structural adjustments to rise to the new realities. There is no short-term solution to the challenge before us. This will not be the first time such economic adjustments need to be undertaken. This time round, however, with the enhanced regional economic and financial integration and networks, the region can leverage upon the relative comparative advantage within the region to address the issues of excess capacity, job losses, and supply chain disruptions arising from the shock. Greater reliance on new technologies and AI will be required. For this, the best minds that resides in ASEAN and the Greater Asia needs to be mobilized to design such a coordinated transformation in the region. While this vision is entirely within reach, it will require political will, institutional capability, and continued public-private collaboration. It will require investment in digital infrastructure, harmonized regulatory frameworks, and mechanisms that support financial inclusion. Vital will be the continued commitment to regional solidarity towards building a stronger, more secure, and prosperous region. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude my remarks today. Amid renewed global shifts, ASEAN once again finds itself at a crossroad. This time, ASEAN is better prepared. We have built institutions, we have deepened markets, and we have cultivated trust. If we remain true to the spirit that has guided ASEAN through its earlier years I'm confident that ASEAN can rise to these new challenges and chart its own course in this multipolar world. As we now turn to the panel with policymakers whom I have had the privilege of working with, I look forward towards a forward-looking discussion and their valuable insights into the challenges and opportunities ahead as ASEAN advances on this important journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Tan Sri Dr. Zati, for your enlightening keynote speech. We are grateful for the insights you have shared with us today. We kindly ask Tan Sri Dr. Zati to remain on stage for a photo session with speakers to commemorate this session. We would like to extend a warm invitation to our distinguished panelists and session moderator to join us on stage for an official photograph. Please welcome Dr. Muhammad Khatib Basri, former Finance Minister of Indonesia, Dr. Viratai Santiprabop, former Governor of Bank of Thailand, Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri Nazir Razak, Chairman of ASEAN Business Advisory Council Malaysia, and Ms. Wong Xiaoning, radio presenter and who will be the moderator for today's session. Additionally, we are honored to request the presence of Datuk Sri Abdul Rashid Ghaffur, Governor of Bank Negara Malaysia, to join our esteemed panelists on stage for the photograph. Thank you, everyone. We invite Yang Berbahagia Datuk Sri Abdul Rashid Ghaffur and Tan Sri Dr. Zati to return to your seats. We kindly request the esteemed panelists and moderator to take your seats on the stage. Lunch will be served now.
Distinguished guests, today's topic, ASEAN financial integration in a multipolar world, could not come at a better time when we've seen economies and capital markets really thrown into the whirlwind over the imposition of tariffs by US President Donald Trump. So joining me on the panel this afternoon is, of course, our distinguished guests. We have Dr. Muhammad Khatib Basri, former Finance Minister of Indonesia, Dr. Viratai Santiprabop, former Governor of Bank of Thailand, and finally, of course, Tan Sri Nazir Razak, former Chairman and CEO of CIMB Group, and now Chairman of the ASEAN Business Advisory Council. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we do have some house rules. We will be taking questions at the end of the session in a good old-fashioned manner, so mics will be available. Just raise your hands. So do think about what you want to ask our panelists. It's not often we get the opportunity to have such distinguished guests on the stage this afternoon. So I'm going to start with the first question, Dr. Khatib. And that's really the big picture question, because we've already seen economists rush out to downgrade global growth forecasts. Even here in ASEAN, almost every house has done so. And I think more are betting than ever that a US recession is inevitable. Will ASEAN be collateral damage, and in any way can this be mitigated?
Well, thank you very much for the question. I think it is inevitable that the Trump reciprocal tariff will have an impact on the ASEAN economic growth. But before I respond to your question, I think it is important also to understand the source of problem. My biggest concern is there will be a full circle, because I don't think that addressing the trade deficit can only be done by increasing the tariff. Because the biggest challenge for the United States at this moment is the issue of the imbalances, the saving investment gap, and also the productivity. So what I'm afraid is, without addressing this issue, it will come up at like a full circle, because this imposing tariff will have this inflationary impact. And many governors of central banks, Dr. Viratai is here, it is difficult for the Fed to cut the rate at this moment. Yeah. So under this kind of situation, maybe the option for many government in ASEAN countries, as Governor Zeti mentioned, is perhaps to focus on the structural reform. Yeah, and I think this is very important. My president, Indonesian president, yesterday announced the importance of this economic deregulation in order to mitigate. That's probably one of the important solution. The second aspect is it varies among the countries. Country like Indonesia, our export share to GDP is only 25%. It's probably will be affected less compared to Singapore, in which that, correct me if I'm wrong, the export to GDP may be about 180%. But definitely, if country has this domestic demand, somehow they can do the counter-cyclical. But the most important thing is to address this issue is if ASEAN countries try not to retaliate, because retaliation of this tariff will bring the country into like what we learned from the Great Depression in 1930, yeah, the beggar the neighbor. This will bring us into this global recession. Last but not least, Governor Zeti mentioned, it is very important. It is about time for ASEAN now to cooperate. Yeah, when we discuss with the United States, it is very important to cooperate. I do understand what in economics we learn about the prisoner's dilemma. Maybe any particular ASEAN countries would like to focus on their own interests, but I do believe this cooperation is always better. So back to your question again, it is inevitable there will be a slower economic growth, but I think it is very important to mitigate, diversifying the export destination, focusing also in the intra-ASEAN trade, and do some the counter-cyclical policy. I hope I respond to your question.
Okay, and building on that, Dr. Ritai, I think financial stability is critical at this juncture, right? The thing is, how do we ensure this from an ASEAN perspective? When you look out externally and there's growing geopolitical pressures, there's the start of this tariff war. Today we know at midnight China's tariffs will be 105%. The impact is going to be severe. What can we do in ASEAN? What should we do?
Thank you very much, Chao Ning. First of all, I'd like to thank Governor Rashid for your invitation. Very delighted to be participating in this forum again and meeting with governors and also ministers. Before I touch on the issues about financial stability, just allow me to respond to your first questions to Pakatip. Another thing that we should not forget is that when we talk about trade with the US, in total globally, the US accounts for only about 20% of global trade. There's a lot of opportunities for the remaining 80%, and that's also applied for ASEAN countries as well. I would very much expect to see, for example, the expeditations of negotiations on trade with other trading partners like the EU, ASEAN, and also the fast track for CPTPP for other members who are willing, other ASEAN members who are willing to join. Okay? Now, the accession period may take about 2 to 2.5 years. If that can be expedited, I think that provide a lot of opportunities for mitigating and also for opening up new opportunities. On financial stability, this is a big shock that we have significant impact on financial markets, and that will lead to financial stability of ASEAN countries. But depend very much on the financial structure of each country. Right? For the countries that are very much bank-based, obviously bank soundness is an important matter. I'm sure many central banks have conducted stress tests with the banking system, making sure that they have proper buffer. What could be a concern, and we may have less visibility, is the impact that may come through the capital market. We have seen significant corrections in the stock market.
Yes.
Bond markets, as Governor Sethi has pointed out, this is part of the financial integration in ASEAN. We have seen significant developments in corporate bond markets in ASEAN during the past 2 decades. When we look at, in some countries, including Thailand, mutual funds like the fixed income funds and corporate bond markets exceed the size of total bank deposits. That visibility is not very clear in terms of the shock on the economy that will come through the bond markets. So it requires that the central banks and also the market regulators, we have to work very closely, ensuring that we have good visibility of developments in the bond market and also have some forms of safety net the central bank may not be the regulator, but the central bank is the only provider of liquidity of last resort if need be. So I think, apart from the banking system, the capital market will need to be watched very closely.
But there are questions about whether the ASEAN way of maintaining neutrality really does hold sway in today's new world order. And Tan Sri, you get that tough question because the fact is ASEAN is neither a political nor monetary nor an economic union. So at the moment, it seems negotiations are the way forward for the 10 member states. But what clout do we have? That's one thing. And is there the risk that each country will pursue their own bilateral relations, negotiations based on their own national interest then?
Thank you, Shanning. I mean, I think firstly, thank you, Central Bank Bank Negara for this opportunity, especially the opportunity to listen to Tan Sri Zeti again. It's been a long time, we miss her. Now, in terms of the speech by our Prime Minister yesterday, he made it very clear that under these conditions, it's very important that we reaffirm ASEAN centrality and the intention for the economic ministers to meet tomorrow and the intention to engage the United States as a collective at the same time, I think, as recognizing that each individual country will also have their own engagements. I think there is much room for us to be able to combine strength and negotiate on principles at least, if not the exact tariffs for each country. The basic principle in how on earth they came up with those definitions of reciprocity, for instance. But ASEAN has always been able to accept differences, accept national priorities, but still act collectively.
The question I have for all three of you all is negotiation the only path when it comes to the US? Do we have any other option? Dr. Khatib, I know you want to answer that question.
Well, of course, it is very important to negotiate at this moment because the way I look at it, the state policy is being used as what we call the weaponized trade. So like it or not, we have to negotiate like what every country in ASEAN does. But I think the most important thing is to strengthen the cooperation among the ASEAN members. And besides that, as Dr. Ferretai has also mentioned, a couple of issues, diversification, and also try to focus about the intra-ASEAN trade, because that's a lot of opportunities that can be expected by enhancing this or intensifying this intra-ASEAN trade. So couple of policy options besides the negotiation. But if your question is whether this negotiation is necessary, my answer is yes, at least for the short term. Try to negotiate, maybe if possible, to sort of like in postponing the implementation of this reciprocal tariff, like what some ASEAN countries try to negotiate with the US, for example.
Tan Sri, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think when people build higher walls, we build longer negotiating tables, right? So I think, spot on that under Malaysia's chairmanship, we're trying to accelerate the FTA with Canada, FTA with Europe, and also we're going to have the first ASEAN GCC China summit as soon as in May.
Yeah. Dr. Ritai, the other thing that has come to my mind is the possibility of a competitive devaluation of a regional currency, and we see more talk of that happening as a means to mitigate the impact of tariffs. Is this a scenario that you think will pan out? And then what happens if such a scenario does happen?
Well, most ASEAN countries have floating exchange rate regime, right? And it's natural when we are hit by a shock like this, the exchange rate would be one form of shock absorber, and you will see the movements in the exchange rate. I think we all know that competitive devaluations will not lead to desirable outcomes at the end of the day if we have implications on inflations in our countries. And at this juncture, we already have very complicated trade war. I don't think we would like to have uncertain and complications coming from another currency war. But having said that, we have to be careful of potential tail risk event. And I'm sure everyone has heard about the Mar-a-Lago Accord, right? It's the US that has this belief that the US dollar being a reserve currency is that has led to overvaluation of the US dollar, and that has led to trade deficits. Look at what had happened with the reciprocal tariff. Nobody knows how policy is being made in the US right now. And if this Mar-a-Lago Accord, which was written by the chairman of Presidential Economic Advisory, the Council of Economic Advisors now, if that gets to materialize, it will have significant impact on the value of US dollars and also possibility on US Treasury bills as a risk-free asset class. That could have significant implications for the global financial markets. And obviously, this could be a tail risk event, but this is something that perhaps we will have to keep our eyes on and see how we can find ways to mitigate such risks if and when it occurs.
The issue is there anything from our history, our shared ASEAN history, that could provide some lessons in terms of how we should approach this if this competitive devaluation of the currencies does materialize, right? Were there any lessons that we can learn from, let's say, the great financial crisis or even Trump 1.0 to mitigate this risk of potential capital outflows, which we're already seeing in ASEAN, I mean, in terms of the equity markets? And then if the currency volatility were to increase, I mean, yesterday we saw Bank Indonesia say they were going to intervene in the rupiah. So, Dr. Khatib, what are our options?
Well, we know that in economic theory, we learn about the so-called the impossible trinity. You can use this exchange rate as the shock absorber for everything, but the reality is a policy mix. Yeah. So, for example, like what I'm not defending Bank Indonesia, I'm not talking on behalf of Bank Indonesia, but what they did is sort of like not pegging the level, but smoothing the volatility, because stability is very important. Yeah, the second part is you're talking about this competitive devaluation, and I completely agree with Dr. Veritai. So far, the way I look at it, this is just a logical consequences with this kind of policy, because like it or not, as you mentioned, Dr. Veritai, US dollar become a safe haven now. Yeah, with this kind of policy and then the US imposing tariff, we won't be surprised if there will be an appreciation of the US dollar against major currencies. So this is quite normal. It's not like the currency manipulator, yeah, the risk of that. So I think this is quite normal. And you mentioned about the bond market. So far, it's very interesting. Let me talk about the Indonesian experience. In our country, the share of the foreign ownership to the government bonds is about 14%. So the impact is relatively less compared to what happened in the equity market. Yeah, this is a thing that probably, we also have to look at more carefully, especially on the equity market.
Okay, and Tan Sri, question for you, because we talk about mitigation, right? And both gentlemen brought up intra-ASEAN trade, which I think currently stands at just 23%. Now, how do we build, and should we, have a minus US strategy going forward? I mean, is it really just focusing on alternative supply chains? What is the option? And the issue about this is, in the meantime, it might be very painful because building those supply chains take time. Building that intra-ASEAN trade takes time. So is there any way to mitigate the short-term pain but focus on the medium and long-term gain?
No, I think it's very difficult to do any major changes for the short term. But nevertheless, there is much scope for us to do more within ASEAN. But just let's be clear. We say that it's only 21%, but don't forget, it's 21% despite the fact that trade has grown tremendously over the years, right? We have actually, intra-ASEAN trade has actually grown, right? It's actually maintained despite huge growth in ASEAN trade. So I think that's an achievement. And people talk about the EU, but let's remember that we're very different. Our economies are more integrated to America and China and all that. So we should be quite pleased with 21%. So even on the upside, people say it's maybe 30%. Then the question is, how do we do more within ourselves? So I think it's, again, a long list. Obviously, one huge concern is the non-tariff barriers. We have this brought down tariffs on 98% of the goods, more or less, but at the same time, there is a corresponding increase in non-tariff barriers. So the issue is, how do we give teeth to someone to actually reduce non-tariff barriers? Yeah, that's very important, because at the moment, we have the ASEAN Assist, but no company actually dares highlight non-tariff barriers because they fear recriminations and so on. So that's about the only mechanism, right? So we need to find a better way of maybe empowering ASEAN Secretariat in some way to enforce non-tariff barriers. Then in terms of internal ecosystems, and we are now, we're putting, at ASEAN BUC, we're pushing very hard on this notion of ASEAN business entities so that our multinationals create more effective, more efficient intra-ASEAN networks for themselves, right? So here, I've just briefed all the central bank governors and finance ministers on the ABE concept. And I really think this is very key because we must accept that ASEAN will never be EU. We're not going to have free movement of people. We're not going to have porous borders. But why not allow it at the company levels? Why not say that companies who are ASEAN business entities can move people around freely and move operations around freely? And in the case of banks, maybe move data around freely. That doesn't require so much. And I'm really pleading that in this time when ASEAN needs to do more together, this is one initiative that we can actually get through this year.
Yeah, because when I was doing my research on this, I thought, could there ever be a positive outcome from these tariffs? And there are glimmers of it in the sense that I think it forces ASEAN to integrate faster. So, gentlemen, I do need to come back, though, to the topic of the day, which is ASEAN financial integration. And Dr. Brita, you get the question in this new world, where multilateralism, globalization, free trade are all questioned. How and what approach should the 10 ASEAN member states adopt to pursue financial integration? Should we look at it differently in 2025?
Well, Governor Sethi has very nicely summarized, the progress that has been made with respect to ASEAN financial integrations. You have seen, a long history and a lot of efforts that have been put in during the past 2 decades. The way I look at it, financial integration is also a kind of public policies. And when I think of any public policies, I put emphasis on 4 keywords: productivity, inclusivity, immunity, and adaptability. We look at productivity, it's very clear a lot of things that we have done, linking from liberalization to payment connectivity in ASEAN. That has resulted in improved productivity in ASEAN. On immunity, the like of Chiang Mai initiative, swap arrangements, facilities to help countries in stress, that provide better immunity against shocks. What I think should be emphasis going forward on inclusivity and adaptability. Obviously, inclusivity with the developments of the payment connectivity, helping the small people in the SMEs, in the workers to be able to transfer money cross-border at a much cheaper rate. That has improved inclusivity. But I think there are also other things that we can do to promote SMEs, and also the workers and the small transactions. Adaptability is going to be very important, particularly adaptability to climate crisis. We require huge investment in ASEAN to mitigate and also to adapt to the changing climate patterns that nobody knows how it's going to unwind. We also need to have perhaps better risk pooling system in ASEAN, reinsurance market that can be developed to share risks across ASEAN countries if there's a big event resulted from climate change. So in my view, if we can also focus on inclusivity and adaptability as part of the roadmaps of ASEAN financial integrations, that would be helpful.
Okay, Dr. Khatib, the issue here, though, is when you want to have financial integration, we look at the 10 member states, right? Their economies are very different. GDP per capita is very different, right? Of course, you've got Singapore on one end, and then the smaller ASEAN nations on the other end. So is it possible to have financial integration where everybody is on the same page in terms of how it should move forward as a, is that our challenge here?
Well,
Because there's no harmonization in some way?
Well, I do understand that this is not an easy thing. Yeah, we've been working, trying very hard since a long time ago on this issue. But as Dr. Zeti mentioned in her remarks, we are making a progress.
Yes, for
so
sure.
if you look at what example in the Asian Bond Market Initiative, yeah, if you're looking about the regional financial safety net, yeah, let me apologize for being undiplomatic. Yeah, the biggest challenge for the regional financial safety net is untested, and also there is a stigma issue regarding with the IMF regarding what happened back on 1998. So many ASEAN countries still concerned about, is it impossible to do the delinking? Yeah, because it was a 20%. If you want to borrow to get the support more than 20%, you need to get a support from the fund. But now it's about 40%. So we're making a progress, and I think this financial integration is very important. Tan Sri mentioned about the importance of this intra-ASEAN trade. Dr. Ferita has also mentioned. If we want to intensify this intra-ASEAN trade, this will require the support of the financial integration because it will reduce the transaction costs. The other thing that we probably need to focus is to harmonize the regulation. This is easier to be said than done, but this is important. And we are making a progress about the operable payment now with the QR. Yeah, and probably we can talk also about the promoting swap agreement. So I know this is not easy, but I think if we look at our positions compared to 20 years ago, yeah, for example, or even 30 years ago, we are making progress on this.
For sure. Tan Sri, I want to draw on your experience having been with the CIMB group for, 3 decades almost, and looking at it from a regional bank perspective and the role it plays in financial integration. So what more can governments do or ASEAN do beyond facilitating market access? What financial integration efforts are necessary to support that vision of a regional bank moving forward? Because it's not just about governments moving forward, but like you say, it's also all the major companies, the banks, MNCs, ASEAN MNCs.
Thank you. I mean, I think not all ASEAN governments appreciate the importance of regional banks. And I think, I think there certainly is an opportunity to reevaluate the framework for regional banks. And I understand this ABIF is also being reviewed. And I think that I look forward to an ABIF that is more granular in terms of how to strengthen regional banks. There has to be focus on things like talent, data sharing, operational outsourcing, because that's where you get the operational synergies. I understand that it does make supervision more complex, recovery plans more complex, but I think it's absolutely necessary. Because when I reflect on the CIMB experience, we did not get the operational synergies that we aspired to get because of the hard wiring of borders in a way.
Yes.
Yeah, I think similarly, I think there are front-end issues like ease of opening accounts even. Because don't forget, if I bank with a Maybank here and I'm thinking of doing business in Indonesia, it's much easier if I then go to Maybank Indonesia and say, hey, I have an account in Malaysia, and you truly recognize that.
And I don't need to do all the paperwork all over again, right?
Today you still have to do a lot of that paperwork all over again. Similarly, I think, some countries don't have regional banks, so maybe they're a bit reluctant to focus on supporting regional banks. But I think there's also room to create alliances of national banks. And maybe you can imagine national banks in a few countries getting together and sharing data and sharing customers, etc. But that would need facilitation by the central banks, as well. So I think overall, I think there's a lot of room to improve regional multinational banking. But if I could just add also, in terms of the overall framework for ASEAN integration, since I've been with it for some time, perhaps there's just three things I'd like to put forward. Yeah, one is let's be more realistic in our ambitions. I think the AEC was unrealistic. ASEAN will never be a single production-based free movement of people and so on and so forth. So if you set more realistic ambitions, then you guide people, more realistically, so people don't have over-ambitious business plans. Two is we've got to be very high on execution. There's too much rhetoric, too much sugarcoating, and in too many ASEAN meetings, you don't get the pushback that you need to improve. Yeah, a lot of people just say yes, 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 and then a few weeks later, you find when the rubber hits the road, when you actually want to do something, they never agreed with it in the first place. So we need that openness and pushbacks in conversations. And finally, I think we need creativity, because if we accept that these are the things that ASEAN cannot do, then we design things that ASEAN can do. And that's why, for instance, people talk about the ASEAN Stock Exchange. That's never going to happen. But there are things that we can do, like having this ASEAN Prospectus IPO.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a move forward. Yeah, forget about the ASEAN Stock Exchange. Don't dream of things that are not going to happen. Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Rita, you were writing some notes, I noticed. Do you have something to add, or shall I just ask you about what is your wish list in terms of financial integration in ASEAN? I mean, we've made strides when it comes to the payment systems front, but should we build on current mega trends, including involving digitalization and sustainability?
No, I can't echo more what Tan Sri has just said. When you talk about financial integrations in the next decade, it has to be pretty much based on digital infrastructure, digital environment. So we have to think of financial integrations with the views of someone with digital expertise, basically. When you talk about one single ASEAN stock exchange, it reminds me of one initiative that I got involved long time ago, trying to develop this ASEAN exchange linkage. And by that, we were trying to very much link the trading platforms of ASEAN countries. But that has been bypassed by new development nowadays. Everyone can trade using their mobile phone. There is no need to develop such a linkage.
With the touch of a button, things are done nowadays.
Exactly, and with the tokenization, with digital ledger technologies, with all these technology developments, when we think of the design of new financial integration is unavoidable, that we have to take into account the digital transformation as key. And when we talk about digital transformation, we have to address issues like what Tan Sri had addressed about the data flows, the ability to use data centers outside the country, and harmonizations of some rules and regulation to be able to facilitate the financial integrations with digital ecosystem in mind.
Okay, and when we talk about ASEAN, sometimes the issue is it's a concept. For a lot of, even here in Malaysians, when I ask my friends, what do you think about ASEAN? It's a meeting of 10 people, 10 countries getting together, and they don't see how it translates into this concept of shared prosperity. So, Dr. Khatib, how does ASEAN integration help, let's say even the SMEs or the MSMEs in Indonesia, be it in Malaysia, Thailand, or any other 10 member states? How can we facilitate that?
Well, as I mentioned to you earlier, the important thing is this ASEAN financial integration can help to reduce the transaction costs. Tan Sri mentioned about it. Yeah, if later on we can sort of like introduce the so-called the interoperable, the payment system, for example, like the QR code. I believe that now the Indonesian payment system like KRIS can be used in some ASEAN countries, for example, and people feel the benefit of it. I'm being pragmatic and I'm humbled by the political reality, as Tan Sri mentioned. Yeah, we have to be very realistic. We have to create a success story that people feel the benefit of it. Yeah, if they can learn something, they get something from the payment system, for example. The process become very easier through the digital. This can support the so-called the small medium enterprise, access to the financing, the working capital, etc. So we have my strategy is try to create a success story. You gather the political support and you move to the more complex and difficult reform.
Okay. Yes, Dr.
Yes, if I may, apart from the creating platform the like of the QR code, the standards are very important.
Yes.
I think for policymakers, if we were to develop new standards that can be used across ASEAN, that could be helpful. The other dimension that is equally important, if not more important, is the incentive structure. Okay. You know that in payment activities, in banking activities, in cross-border transactions, there are intermediaries who have roles, have played, intermediary roles for a long, long time. And the incentive structure is just like spaghetti bowl behind. So I think it's very important to redesign incentive structure to facilitate all these transaction across ASEAN using digital tools.
Okay. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is open to questions. It would be helpful if we know who the question is for. Just please raise your hands and the mic comes to you. Who would be the brave one in the room to ask the first question? Yes, there's a gentleman there. A mic will come to you.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Lam. I'm from the Hong Leong Bank Group. Mine is more of a question, but also a comment. The Trump administration has seized the narrative by calling it a reciprocal tariff. Now, all of us who have looked at the numbers obviously know that, first of all, it's not reciprocal, and the way they computed it is completely just taking account of goods without looking at services. The US economy is more than 70% the services economy. Advanced economies, including even Malaysia's economy, is more than 50% services. So I think one of the things that the ASEAN leadership really needs to do, other than all these fairly long shots like, unity and all that, but I think the unity in narrative, right? Somebody speaking up with one united voice to say that, first of all, the calculation is flawed, is wrong, and you need to consider services, and it is not a reciprocal in the first place. It is unilateral. You started it first, and hence you need to call it out, right, and be able to use the right language when we begin the process of discussion and negotiation. So I heard from all the esteemed speakers from the panel this afternoon, but perhaps one of the things that we should really try to do is be able to, whether through our media, our united voice in ASEAN, right, be able to change the words that are being used. It is not reciprocal tariff, and the computation does not take into account services, which is such a huge part. If you look at the services component, we run a huge deficit with the US on services. How do you account for that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Who would like to take that question? Dr. Khalid, you wrote some notes, so I'm going to pick on you. Do you think we should change the narrative? Is it possible? Or Tan Sri, do you have something to add? At this point, will it make a difference?
I think we all know, we all know there's a lot of fiction in the current narrative and all that, but I think we should leave it to the political masters. I don't think Trump's the kind of guy you want to go up to and say, this is rubbish.
No,
right? You
I
might
don't
not
think
get.
it kind of works.
It's a negotiation strategy.
Yes.
So I think we leave it to the political masters.
The art of the deal, right? I think that's the term everybody uses today. Any other questions from the floor? No? Okay, I have a question on sustainability financing. I think that's critical. And it's also one of the topics being discussed during the many meetings that's happening this week. And the reality is we have US turning its back on climate change, right? They have decided that this is not for them. And then we saw the biggest 6 banks in US saying, we're leaving the Net Zero Alliance. That's not for us. But in ASEAN, I think we still want to pursue sustainability financing. We want to attract green capital. But the reality is we might be the 5th largest economy as a bloc, but can we move ahead when other countries perhaps don't want to pursue this agenda anymore? Dr. Khatib?
Well, I think this climate issue is very existential issue. So we have to, because this issue is, if you're talking about the risk of the cost of inaction, not doing something, it's probably larger than the cost of doing something. The question is how to sort of like to to implement the so-called this climate finance. The way I look at it, let me share the perspective from Indonesia. The way I look at it, we should talk about what I call the integrated financing scheme. The role of the domestic resource mobilization is very crucial. Yeah. So let me give an example. Let me be frank and open with you. One of the biggest challenges in the case of Indonesia is the fuel subsidy. When I was a finance minister, I had to adjust the fuel price by 45%, but this is not politically easy. Yeah. If we don't get the price of the fossil fuel right, there will be no incentive to invest on the renewable energy. That's the first one. So domestic resource mobilization is a very important one. The second aspect is domestic resource itself is not enough. So this should be supported by the multilateral. So concession loan through the SDR to the Regional Development Bank, this could support the so-called the blended finance to do the de-risking. Then we'll create a sort of like incentive for the private sector or the philanthropy to coming in. Without addressing this issue, I think that will be rather difficult to, to have this sustainable finance.
Any other questions from the floor? Okay, I have a question for you, Tan Sri, and it's about funding, but a different source of funding. I think in the sense that when we look at ASEAN, we just think, oh, banks. But I think many other sources of funding to develop, let's say, infrastructure projects, which are much needed in this region, are not considered and maybe not as developed. One, of course, is private equity, and we know you're a chairman of an ASEAN PE fund, or even considering sovereign funds, which Indonesia is embarking on. How do we encourage this and foster alternative sources of funding? And is it at a very nascent stage?
Yeah, coincidentally, we've just done a report together with McKinsey on the state of private markets in ASEAN. And we think that currently the total capital in private markets is about 0.5% GDP, when for our state of development, we estimate that the right number is about 1.5% GDP. So there's about $60 billion short in terms of private market capital. And I think it's very important that we look at how to encourage more capital into the private markets, and also, and relatedly, why it's not there. Yeah. So one of the issues is the fragmentation of ASEAN markets. Yeah. So we need to find a way of reducing this fragmentation. For instance, one idea is, of course, if you are a private equity business or a venture cap business, you can be badged as an ASEAN or a local in each market, so you don't face the shareholding restrictions. Then you look at the other issue is monetization and the lack of deep capital markets, etc., for exits in ASEAN. So how do you do that? Thirdly, and that's the ASEAN IPO and stuff. And third issue is the amount of capital. How do we channel more capital into private markets? Here you can look at the role of DFIs, for instance. I always think that development finance institutions should actually do less debt and more equity. They should put more money in venture and private markets. You also look at our savings funds. At the moment, many of our institutions, they have these asset allocation models. Yes. And they have this percentage to private markets. But unfortunately, when you look at the percentage of private markets, most of it is actually in the West because of diversification.
Also, there are probably more deals out there, supposedly,
and more deals and so on.
Right?
So we need to look at how to convince them that actually they should help develop the local or ASEAN private market industry.
Okay. Dr. Vritai, this is a kind of a curveball question. At the end of the day, when you look at what's happened, the geopolitical tensions, the tariffs, is there a silver lining to all of this for ASEAN?
Well, we have gone through many shocks. We have gone through many rounds of crisis, some bigger than what's going on now. I think we should not, waste a crisis. We should turn a crisis into an opportunity. And again, to echo what Governor Sethi mentioned in her remarks, this is an opportunity for us to move faster, closer, to be stronger, because U.S. administrations comes and go. Every 4 years there will be change, but if we continue with our efforts on integration and strengthening collaborations, I'm sure we will come much stronger.
Yes, because like you say, presidents come and go, but ASEAN just needs to move forward and be agile on that front. On that note, unfortunately, we've run out of time. So I'd like to thank our panelists, Dr. Vritai Santiprabho, Dr. Muhammad Khatib Basri, and of course, Tan Sri Nazir Razak. Back to you, Umil.
Thank you, Ms. Xiaoning. Thank you, panelists and moderator, for the fruitful and insightful discussion. This concludes the Eminent Persons Dialogue session. Thank you for your participation, and we hope you found the event enlightening. If you haven't had the opportunity to do so yet, the Malaysia Open House exhibition at Exhibition Hall 7, Level 3, is still welcoming guests, and you can experience and shop for a variety of Malaysian craft and delicacies. Other interactive exhibitions and activities are also being held at the exhibition. Thank you.